If you could describe your experience at the DMV in one word, what would it be?
Wait.
Horror show.
Obviously not good.
Strenuous.
Like death and taxes, waiting at the Department of Motor Vehicles is something we all must endure. In the iconic movie Beetlejuice, there's even a DMV-like office in the afterlife.
You don't have an appointment, do you?
Well, we didn't know how to make one.
You'll have to wait if you don't have an appointment.
An appointment with who?
You know the stereotypes. Crowded waiting rooms, overworked employees, very little patience. And in fairness, depending on where you live in the country, none of that may actually be true. But here in North Carolina,
renewing your license can be a pain, right? With those long lines and delays at the DMV.
At this point, appointments for Charlotte area DMVs are booked out 3 months, which is
massive delays affecting hundreds of thousands of people across the state.
It's a major problem. And in an era where government efficiency is all the rage, it's generating talk of some dramatic solutions.
You know what? We're just going to privatize the whole thing.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, contributor Victoria Dominguez-Peak follows the quest to fix North Carolina's DMV and finds out what that means for anyone who just needs a new driver's license.
Number 54,601.
Well, looks like I'm next.
When my husband and I moved to North Carolina in 2021, we did all the basic things you have to do in order to start a new life. We found a place to live, set up utilities, and for the most part, we got all of our administrative tasks checked off. But then, a few months later, midterm elections rolled around, and I realized, oh, I'm still registered to vote in Florida. So I Googled register to vote in North Carolina and found that DMVs in the state automatically register you to vote when you get a new license, which I needed to do anyway. How convenient, I thought, as I landed on the webpage for new driver's license appointments. Except there weren't any. Every day for about 3 months, I'd hop on the website and check for an opening at my local DMV office. And there was nothing. I only got my license after taking the day off work to drive to a county about 90 minutes away. It was a terrible experience, but one I mostly forgot about until recently when I started to notice something strange on drives by my local DMV. Lines. Long lines. And one day, I parked my car, got out, and started asking questions.
Okay, so it's about 6:45. I'm looking at this line right now outside of DMV in Cary, and it is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It's about 32 people deep. How early did you guys wake up?
5:45.
5:45, but we came 2 days ago at noon, and we were told that there were over 100 people in line, and there was no point in us getting in line.
One woman told me that the line had started to form at 3 in the morning. Others brought out fold-out lawn chairs to sit on, and one person was even asleep. I stopped by the DMV again in the early afternoon, and people were still waiting.
One of their employees had said if they were booked, the best time to come back is tomorrow at 5 a.m.
How long have you been here today?
I've been here. This is my third day here, but I've been here since 10 o'clock today.
Were you able, so you're just doing walk-ins, so you didn't make an appointment online?
No, didn't see a point. It's 4 months out.
Turns out, my experience with North Carolina's DMV was not isolated. In fact, it may have gotten worse. So why is this happening?
Well, there are some clues.
WUNC reporter Bradley George has been investigating the problem for months now, and he's also had some personal experience with the topic.
I moved back to North Carolina from Florida in 2022.
What was that like?
Well, I remember going to get my driver's license, and I had to wait probably about 2 hours. So it was just kind of a chaotic situation.
Bradley says clue number 1 is aging infrastructure. During the pandemic, many states, like California, expanded online services to limit in-person visits and wait times. But in North Carolina, a lot of transactions still have to be done in person.
And that's because there is an outdated mainframe computer system that the state uses for most of its DMV record keeping. So the state is trying to transition to something that's more modern, a cloud-based system that will allow them to offer more transactions online, but that transition's still happening.
Clue number 2, not enough DMV workers.
Well, a lot of government agencies, state and federal, since COVID have had staffing issues where people are leaving for better paying jobs. Now, in rural parts of the state, you also have places where driver's license offices have shut down because maybe there was one person working in that office and they've done their 25, 30 years with the state and they've retired, and there's no one there to take over for them.
And the final clue, population growth. And the DMV, led by Commissioner Wayne Goodwin, hasn't been able to keep up.
And over the last 20 to 25 years, we've had about 2.5 million people come to the state new, in addition to the folks who are already here. But we have roughly the same number of employees.
Has there been any sort of movement to try to get more DMV employees?
Commissioner Goodwin has certainly talked about that, but it's up to the General Assembly to approve the funding for the various state agencies, including DMV. So it's in their court for the lawmakers to decide whether or not those positions will get filled.
Last year, the Department of Motor Vehicles requested funding to hire an additional 80 employees to help get a handle on the situation. After some deliberation in the Republican-led state legislature, they ended up getting 0. There are some stopgap solutions floating around. The state is setting up kiosks at select locations in the Triangle and Charlotte areas where residents can renew driver's licenses. No appointments or wait times required. But the larger issues have people on both sides of the political aisle frustrated. And some lawmakers have been exploring a more dramatic solution.
There's a committee in the legislature that has grilled the DMV Commissioner Wayne Goodwin several times. And last year, they actually requested some researchers at UNC Greensboro at NC State look at some options for maybe privatizing the DMV.
That study came out last fall, and Bradley was the first reporter to get his hands on its findings.
I was convinced in my own little way that this might be just a little bit of a blockbuster. It would be an exclusive for WUNC. It would get some play, on social media. People would be curious about it. And finished the story, still feeling great.
But on the same day Bradley's article was published, there was another, small story that came out of North Carolina.
Now, we are staying on top of those bombshell allegations today and the potential for a major shakeup in the race for governor in North Carolina.
For governor in North Carolina, right now, Mark Robinson has made dozens of disturbing and damning comments on a porn website. Some of the comments are frankly so disturbing that we cannot air them. But they include Robinson writing, quote, "I am a black..."
So my story basically got crushed.
Awkward timing aside, the findings were interesting. One option in the report, expansion of partial privatization, which really isn't a new concept. Some parts of North Carolina's DMV are already privatized.
When you go to get a license plate, that's an independent business run by someone who has a contract with the state. When you get your safety inspection or your emissions inspection, you're going to an auto repair shop that's also has a contract with the state.
But what would happen if all of the DMV was privatized? In a surprising twist, the study noted that total privatization had been tried in another place with a similar population size.
So in the mid-90s, New Jersey experimented with privatizing every service that its state DMV offered, and didn't go too well.
After the break, New Jersey's DMV experiment, and why what happened in Jersey might just stay in Jersey.
Hey, y'all. I want to share another podcast you might be interested in. It's called Our New South, from the Levine Museum of the New South in Charlotte, North Carolina. The show explores today's South, who we are, how we got here, and where we want to go, through social, political, and cultural topics of the moment. It features conversations with changemakers from across the South and imagines the collective future of our changing region. Listen to Our New South wherever you get your podcasts.
Let me just do one thing quickly.
This is Larry Higgs.
There we go. I had to throw the cat out because he has chewed through wires on multiple pieces of equipment, including my wireless router. And I think there's a picture of that router in a Verizon manual somewhere.
In addition to being Verizon famous, Larry is probably New Jersey's most well-known transportation reporter. He currently covers the beat for NJ.com and the Star Ledger. And while he didn't cover the privatization of New Jersey's DMV, he certainly lived and drove through it.
You know, when they privatized, it was a horror show. Everyone had a horror story.
Much like North Carolina today, in the early 1990s, New Jersey's DMV services were partially privatized. The parts run by the state were overseen by two separate agencies. At times, it was confusing and a little inefficient, so the governor found a solution. And
this was a Republican administration that said, well, we can save money, lay off people, get cheaper workers by privatizing all of them. The agencies were privatized in 1996, and that was designed to try to save $4 million by privatizing 23 state-run agencies.
The operation to privatize New Jersey's DMV took a few years, but soon enough, the changes started to be felt by New Jersey drivers, including Larry.
And it was a resounding flop. There were long lines, there were customer complaints. You kind of either knew from your neighbors or anecdotally, when to go.
And just like North Carolina, the New Jersey DMV also had some major infrastructure issues.
And that was one of the other problems with our DMV, is they were operating on a very archaic computer system with a mainframe.
They hired the company 3M to update their program.
They called it the Matrix program.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And to this day, I think they took the wrong pill, because it was over budget, over cost, and finally 3M got bought out by another company, and the company that bought them out decided, we don't want to be in the business of DMVs anymore.
The company canceled the contract and walked away. Lawsuits followed. By the early 2000s, New Jersey's experiment with a fully private DMV was on its way out too. In 2002, New Jersey's new Democratic governor created a Fix the DMV task force, and it issued a report. It highlighted the issues Larry brought up, as well as things like not having enough DMV employees and the issuing of fraudulent driver's licenses. Fix the DMV concluded that total DMV privatization had caused, quote, poor, disjointed, and confused service delivery. And the following year, New Jersey restored the DMV's functions back to the state.
When they put back to state control, it became not that bad. And I mean, in Jersey, that's a rave.
But back in North Carolina, folks are not raving about the DMV.
Well, as a transportation chair, you can imagine how many emails and phone calls that I started to receive in regards to, the level of service at DMV.
Republican State Senator Michael Lazarra is one of the DMV's sharpest critics and was a leading voice behind the recent privatization study. Lazarra has tussled with state Democrats and the DMV commissioner, who have both called for funding to hire more staff in the beleaguered office.
In contrast to that, I don't believe that people is the solution.
He and many of his colleagues argue that technology is the way forward.
I think it starts with the idea that the back-end systems, which involves 3 different sets of software platforms that are extremely old. They're old, they're antiquated, and they need to be upgraded.
Some of those upgrades are happening right now and could improve service in the future. But in the meantime, the gridlock continues. And while Lazarra has disagreements with his Democratic counterparts, he recognizes a fundamental problem. The situation has become an embarrassment for everyone. If lawmakers can't find a solution, what does that say?
Well, and that's exactly right. I believe we are going to solve it. That's one of my number one goals, because it is the largest forward-facing government entity that we have, and we need to do a much, much better job at it. We don't need it to be a source of frustration. We have plenty of things that we could be frustrated about when it comes to government, and DMV should not be one of them.
That means that a radical idea like totally privatizing the DMV, a la New Jersey in the 90s, is likely off the table for now. And it seems like the study commissioned by the General Assembly had a similar view. It cautioned against a hasty implementation of privatization.
I think this study might have sobered them up a little bit about that.
Richard Stradling is a longtime transportation reporter at the News and Observer. He says, with some basic functions, privatization has its limits.
Private business does everything better, right? That's the thought. But, private business has the option to walk away from something, and this is not making, we can't make money doing this, so let's stop doing it. Let's just shut it down. Well, you can't do that with the DMV.
And he suspects the DMV is already pushing the boundaries of government efficiency.
So the DMV points out that the state's population has grown by 2.6 million since 2003. That's a 31% increase. And that in that time, they've been authorized to open 3 new offices and to hire 0 new driver's license examiners. A driver's license examiner is the person that you meet with who takes your information and processes it and gets your license going.
This year, the DMV is requesting 85 new positions. While Richard is hesitant to predict that a compromise is on the horizon, there does appear to be an opening. Because change is in the air. Republicans no longer have a supermajority in the state legislature. There's a new governor in Raleigh. And in February, DMV Commissioner Goodwin said he would be stepping down. And since you've been covering this issue for a while and you drove here in North Carolina to this studio, what do you think is actually going to take to fix this problem from just a functional standpoint?
Well, I do think it's going to take lawmakers and the DMV and the administration to work together. Right now, these last few years have been sort of at loggerheads. There's been some animosity, I guess, between the lawmakers and the DMV, and somehow they're going to have to get past that and sit down and work something out.
Until then, North Carolina drivers will just have to wait. And wait. And maybe wait some more.
During the course of our reporting, we reached out to DMV Commissioner Wayne Goodwin, but he declined to be interviewed. This episode of The Broadside was produced by Victoria Dominguez Peak and edited by Jared Walker. The rest of our team includes producer Charlie Shelton Ormond and executive producer Wilson Sayre. The Broadside is a production of WUNC North Carolina Public Radio and is part of the NPR network. You can email us at broadside@wunc.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. I'm Anissa Khalifa. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.